Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Chitheads. My guest today is Wlliam K. Mahony. Bill Mahony is the Charles A. Dana Professor of Religion and Chairman of the Religion Department at Davidson College, where he teaches courses on the religions of India. He also teaches workshops, trainings, and retreats on yoga philosophy across the U.S. and abroad. His books include The Artful Universe, an introduction to the Vedic religious imagination, and Exquisite Love, heart-centered reflections on the Narada Bhakti Sutra. So hello, Bill. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hello, it's good to be with you.
So before we chat a little bit about some of your work, I really want to talk to you today about a book I've really enjoyed reading, The Artful Universe, and also your work on Bhakti. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to hear a little bit first about your own personal story, your relationship with yoga, and maybe how it's evolved and led you to the work that you do.
Okay. Um, I, I I grew up in Colorado, and I have a great sense of kind of the beauty and mystery of expansive space, um, and um, and then started a Zen practice, a Zen Buddhist practice, at about age 18.
Wow.
I've continued that Zen practice for a few years, and then when I was 18, I just think I was about 18. I also read the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads for the first time, and I felt as I was reading, particularly the Upanishads, I felt that the words kind of glowed and almost vibrated or jumped off the page.
Yeah.
I felt that as I was reading them, I had a hard time sleeping that night. I was just so kind of energized by reading them.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that they were saying something that at a very deep level I already knew, and that these were giving words to some very deep experience, and I was drawn to them, and I found them very compelling. This was in translation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to India when I was when I was 20. I actually turned 21 in India,
Wow.
and that's an important time in just about everybody's life.
Yeah.
A time of exploration, and that was the case with me. I was there for about 6 months, and I traveled all over the place. Was mostly by myself, but I spent time. I traveled by bicycle and bus and train, but I spent a lot of time in meditation centers and temples and ashrams, and I found myself becoming very drawn to it and resonated deeply with it. I was also very moved by the range of human experience in India.
Mm-hmm.
From the most beautiful to the most disturbing in some ways.
Yeah.
And I found it all very, my heart just opening, and I felt very alive. I mean, I still do. Um, and I found that as I was coming to know something about India, and reading more, reading translations more and more, visiting the temples, the meditation sites, and continuing the practice of meditation. I came to, I think, an increasing sense of a kind of gracious divine presence within all things, within all of the range of human experience, and I had some intuition of that gracious kind of presence supporting me as well, within me and supporting me inwardly. And I came to identify this as a kind of mystical presence, or the mystical experience of this presence, and I wanted to know more and more about it. And so I came back to the United States. I returned to college and majored in English literature. I was mostly quite drawn to the Romantic poets who Coleridge, Wordsworth, Emerson, who I felt were speaking of this, of perhaps similar intuitions, Yeats and Blake. And after I graduated from college, I realized I really wanted to go deeper and deeper into this. I had started an asana practice several years previous to this. And I wanted to know more and more about the religious dimensions, aspects of these intuitions that I was having. So I went to divinity school and learned about religion in divinity school, different religions, and then and then I earned my PhD in comparative religions, history of religions and comparative religions, with an emphasis on the religions of India. During that time, I studied Sanskrit throughout. I studied Pali, and came to be able to read at least somewhat the texts in their original form. And then I became a professor. I've been a professor here for 36 years now, teaching students about the religions of India and taking students to India. I find that I'm very interested not only in the mystical dimensions, the contemplative dimensions of religions of India. I'm also interested in poetry and the way these intuitions are expressed through words and through sounds, and the place of the mantra and the role of mantra, and that leads then to an exploration of the nature of the body, and how does in what way is the body a kind of poem, as it were. And then I had the sense of, I've mentioned this kind of gracious presence that supports all things, is within all things. I became more and more comfortable with language of love, of this presence as love. And so my initial kind of interests in Upanishads, Vedanta, and then earlier on, going earlier into the Vedic suktas, the Vedic poems and songs, my interest then kind of, what's a good word? I don't want to say refined or shifted, because it was there all the time. But to me, there was a connection, an inner connection between the experience of divinity and the experience of love. So that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh well, I just wanted to ask, because going back to the idea of poetry and the body as a poem, which I think is so beautiful. I don't think I've ever heard anyone express it like that. Obviously, relates really nicely to your work on the Artful Universe, which I've had the distinct pleasure of reading. It's really beautiful, and your ability to kind of capture this kind of culture that really, rather than the scientists, like our day being the high priests of culture, it's really the poets. And as much as I've known and studied Vedic teachings, I've never quite seen it kind of articulated in this way. So what led you to, was it your own experience with literature that really allowed you this insight into the Vedic worldview as being coupled with this kind of artful, creative capacity? So could you talk a little bit about the kind of inspiration behind that book?
Yeah, it's hard for me to separate my kind of poetic sensibility from my mystical sensibility.
Right.
In some ways they're the same, and so it's not that one led to another.
Yeah.
I think, having said that mystical intuition, in a sense, preceded my my conscious kind of attention to poetry. Poetry, to me, came to express the mystical intuition. So said differently, my interest in Veda and Vedanta, and then also Theravada Buddhism and early Theravada, and then Tantra. I think that, in a sense, found expression in the poetry. Um, and the recognition of, well, like I said, some of the romantic poets in Europe and North America, I think reinforced what I was feeling already.
Mm.
I think one thing to keep in mind is the understanding of the word Veda itself, and as you and your listeners probably know, the word Veda has something to do with knowledge,
Yeah.
and sacred knowledge. Um, and knowledge of the sacred, as it were, and knowledge that is sacred. Um, and what is this knowledge of? What is the content? It is what are addressed as seers, rishis, see the world um, as, we might say, sacred, and that seeing the world as sacred in some way, they are then able to express that vision, that intuition, that vision. It's known as D, with words,
Mm.
so that the words are actually the expression of the vision itself. So that the words are visionary words, and these rishis who have this kind of inner vision of the sacred world become known as dhira. One of the words that we can translate as kind of wise, sage,
Mm-hmm.
and that word dhira and D is connected to the word dhyana, which means meditation.
Mm.
It's all sort of connected. A perception of mystery and of beauty, and the intuition of a powerful presence, and then the articulating, expressing it in words and in sounds, and with one's actions, kind of a basis of ritual, the activity in the world that supports the sacred world, the conflation of action with word, ritual and poetry. It's all there in the Veda.
Yeah. Wow. So, what is the role then? You're speaking about this kind of creative sort of upsurge of knowledge through poetry, and so I guess it's worthwhile to talk about, since we're talking about Veda and the meaning of Veda, what Urta is,
Oh,
and how does that relate to Veda, and why is that so important to our understanding of the Vedic kind of worldview?
yeah, that's good. The word Rita, um, if you're trying to, well, you just say it, Rita. Um, it's a Sanskrit word that literally means that which turns, or
Mm.
that which, and it has a sense of that which is always turned, and so there's a sense of a kind of an eternal dynamic movement,
Yeah.
and it has a sense of balance and harmony and order. In fact, it's related to the English word order.
Mm-hmm.
So these Vedic visionaries, looking out into the world, into the universe, saw a world that is balanced and harmonious in its natural state, and dynamic. And there is a kind of artfulness to this world. In fact, the English word art is related to the Sanskrit rita,
Mm.
as are other words like order, and other words like that, ritual itself. Um, so that's part of what these visionary sages saw. They saw Rita. They saw um, uh, a dynamic principle of harmony and balance that is very ecological in a way, where everything fits together in the natural state. Everything fits together in a perfect way, and is in a dynamic, moving way, so that the seasons follow each other. The moon goes through its cycles. The sun rises and sets every day. You see that within the movements of the world there is an order, an artful quality to it.
Mm. And then what is the role then of imagination in relating to or seeing or becoming aware of that Rita?
Um, it is the imagination, and now we're translating words like D.
Yeah.
It is the imagination that is able to what would be a good word, to internalize that vision, and to draw that the outer world, the vision of the outer world, to draw it within oneself, and to see those same dynamics working within one's own awareness, within one's own consciousness, even within one's own body. And if you think of the word imagination, I mean, imagination is the making of an image.
Yeah.
See, the forming of an image, here within the mind itself, the forming of an image of this dynamic order, this dynamic principle of harmony and beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And forming images of it, in one case forming verbal images of it, and the verbal images then become the poems, the songs in praise of the gods and the goddesses, who are said to be forces that align with this universal Rita, this universal artfulness, and in their own power of divine imagination, according to the Vedic songs, form images in their own minds, and then project those images outward and live with, and then embody them. I mean, dwell in the images that they have projected, and those images that they are said to have projected become the physical universe, so that the imagination is actually creative. There is a creative quality to the imagination, as well as a kind of revelatory function of the imagination. It's through the imagination that this Rita is revealed. And then when Rita in some way is threatened through acts that destroy or threaten the universal harmony of the world, the universe, it's the imagination that sees possibilities, ways to heal it and to put it back together again.
Yeah.
And this was one of the functions of ritual in the Vedic world, the yajna, the offering. It was a way of, in an active way, physically, dramatic way, putting the balance and harmony of the world back together again.
Where do you think, speaking of ritual, because I really liked, I can't remember exactly the way you expressed it in the book, but there was something about the way you spoke about ritual that seemed very, I don't know, it sort of brought to light a way we might relate to ritual now that would be very fruitful, as opposed to this idea of ritual as sort of, empty ritual, something that like habitually we do culturally. And you could even say, or some people have said about the early Vedic practitioners, that it just became this sort of like empty repetition of ritual, blah, blah, blah. So how might we see this idea of ritual as you describe it in the Vedic imagination, as serving a kind of purpose of integrating our experience with our environment?
Well, when there is the sense that that unrita, which is a word meaning against Rita,
yeah.
One of the synonyms for Rita is satya, which means truth. We see that in the yoga tradition as well. And so a synonym for unrita is asatya, untruth, falsehood. When there is the sense that truth and goodness and beauty in some way is threatened, then in the Vedic vision, the Vedic world, human beings can actually do something about it. They can gather substances that are good and beautiful and filled with life, and and they can bring them to a sacred fire. This is very Vedic. Okay, they can bring it to a sacred fire, and the sacred presence within the fire, identified as Agni, the god Agni, will then enjoy or eat or drink of those offerings, and will bring them to the heavens along the column of the smoke, and distribute them to the divinities, the gods of light. And when there is the light, then the light can be renewed, and rain falls, and the cycles of the universe continue. You see, so my point is that the human beings can have, in the Vedic world, human beings have a sense that there's actually the possibility of participating in this rita, in this dynamic cycle of existence.
Right.
And it's when they forget, I think, using the language that you used earlier, that when they forget what is the kind of inner meaning of this,
right,
this drama in the best sense, this activity on a stage, as it were, which is ritual. When they forget the inner significance of it, then it becomes without a kind of significance. There's no signified to the signifier, as it were.
Yeah.
And it becomes empty and becomes meaningless. And I think this is part of what leads to the Vedanta. Some of these sages and their students, their teachers, their students, began to ask, what is this ritual that we are performing? Why are we performing it? Do the gods really exist? I mean, does our action in the world really have any significance or meaning? And so what the Vedanta teachers, the teachers of the Vedanta, the Upanishads and their commentators, realize is that all of that which is sacred, that is in the outside world, the outer universe, is also within each one of us. And that the outer expression of ritual is actually an expression of an inner state, understood from the Vedic perspective, from the Vedantic Vedic perspective. So that there's this realization that there's a homology between the outer world and the inner world, and that is what makes the ritual actually significant. Is the ritual is the outward expression of inner states, and that's the link then with contemplative understanding of ritual.
Right.
And I see very similar ideas in Tantra. It's not a Vedic concept and a Vedic tradition, of course, but that outward action follows inner states, or is an expression of inner states, and that is when ritual becomes significant, is when one realizes that this is an expression of an inner state rather than an outward.
I see. Beautifully said. So then, would it be safe to say then that we might say that some kind of incarnations of religion have become more about the external ritual and have lost sort of, maybe we'll call it, their esoteric core or essence?
Yeah, I think in some ways, I've heard people say that that's the shift between a kind of mystical intuition, mystical participation, contemplation, into what we might call religion. I'm not comfortable with saying that myself. I appreciate the word religion.
Yeah.
That when it becomes rote, when it becomes activity that is not understood in the context of a deep inner experience, then it becomes empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So can I actually push you on that, because I like what you said, how people do describe this as, the dead rituals are what we might call religion, and then there's the mystical. So, but you were mentioning that you like the word religion. So if we were to kind of get more nuanced about it, what do you see as being beneficial in what we might call the practice of reappropriating the word religion in a less rigid, as it's become passed down sort of way?
Yeah. Well, one way I'd like to do this, and maybe it's helpful, is to think about the word religion itself, the word religion, the English word.
Hmm.
Um, my understanding is that it comes from religio, I think it's Latin, um, religio, which means a relinking, a rejoining, a reconnecting. And if there is the sense that in some way the world has become broken or fractured, or there has been some sort of separation between heart
Hmm.
and world, or between people. You see that a bit in sort of traditional terms, that some sort of difference or separation or break between uh, divinity and human spirit, then then there is the possibility of relinking. You see, of
Yeah.
rejoining, and and that is religion at a kind of literal level. That is religion. It is the integration. I use the word integration all the time. Um, Religion is integration. It is
Mm.
integrating what has in some way come to be felt as disintegrated. Um, And so, when there is a ritual performed with understanding of the significance, the inner experience, the inner significance of this ritual, social significance, natural, cosmic significance,
Yeah.
then there is a relinking with that significance. You see, and that's religion.
Mm.
Now, just to go on a little bit further, um, that idea of linking, of joining, connecting at all levels, outward, inward, mental, emotional, physiological, and all of that, then it could be said to be yoga as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So I'm not uncomfortable with the use of religion, the word religion, and the word yoga. And
Yeah.
I don't think they're completely separate from each other, at least the way I think about it.
Yeah. I really like that way of thinking about it. I think that's very insightful. So, now, since we're on this subject, what do you think? Obviously, you study the Indian religions or the Indian traditions, and from an insider point of view, some of the practitioners refer to what they're doing as Sanatana Dharma, is this other word
Mm.
for the Hindu spiritual perspective. So, what do you see as being the kind of main difference between Dharma and religion? And maybe, with your kind of
Mm.
the religion as the way you've kind of described it, maybe there wouldn't be much of a difference, but I'm curious your thoughts are on that.
Um, well, here I'll be the professor again here.
Okay, go for it.
Let's look at the word dharma itself. And as you likely know, it comes from a verbal root that means something like something to do with support,
Mm,
that which supports. Um, so a pillar, for example, is sometimes described as dharma because it supports the
yeah.
ceiling above. Okay, um, and so the a kind of basic etymological meaning of the word dharma is that which supports. And so, supports what? Well, at one level, supports the world. Dharma is that which supports existence, supports life, supports goodness.
Mm,
And there are different ways of supporting. You see that there are ways that one can act in the world that are supportive of the integrity, the integration of the world, and there are ways that one can act that actually serve disintegration, can end up destroying the world. You see, so we have an idea of dharma and adharma, and with this idea of support, supporting that which is good, that which is true, if you want to use words like truth, dharma also then means truth.
hmm.
Uh, and dharma also means that which expresses the truth. So, dharma means teachings, you see, particularly in the Buddhist context.
Yeah.
Um, but this idea of a Sanatana Dharma, of an eternal Dharma, Sanatana meaning roughly you can translate as kind of timeless or eternal. The idea that there is that there are ways and attitudes that one can hold that actually one can hold throughout time, and that have been supportive in the past, and will be supportive in the future. There are ethical ways of living. There are ways of honoring beauty and goodness and truth. You see, now then some people will then associate what might be called Hinduism, which is a very vague term,
right?
Hinduism with Sanatana Dharma, and that's where we usually hear it, the reference to that phrase Sanatana Dharma as a coming from the Hindu perspective. But the word Hindu itself is problematic. I mean, it literally means something to do with a river, somebody who lives by the river. And if you had gone back to India, several centuries ago, and asked, "Are you a Hindu?" That person might say, "I don't live anywhere near the river." You see, it's a geographical and political word.
And it was a word sort of established by those looking from the outside, correct? It was
yes,
kind of a Western imposing of a term on a geographical people.
Exactly. We see it used in by some of the Greek emissaries, and from Greece to what we now call India. It comes from the word Indus, which is a river. It means she flows. Okay, and those who were lived on the other side of the Indus were known. They were Sindhus, as it were. I'm conflating history a great deal here, and then they were known as Hindus by the people who didn't actually live there.
Yeah.
By the Greeks, and then the Persians and others, and then the European colonialists and that sort of thing.
Interesting. So I want to go back maybe a little bit, and I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple concepts, or I don't know, experience is the right word. Concepts doesn't quite grasp it, but that are in the Vedas and that you speak a lot about, because I want to kind of explore them, what they mean and what they were, but also maybe looking at them and seeing what, essentially Vach and Soma. I want to talk about Vach and Soma, and then I want to explore how these might be seen as more than historical anachronisms. How we might experience Vach and Soma in our kind of, I don't know, lives. And I know you do a lot of work with yoga teacher training, so I'm sure you maybe get asked this question a lot, like how we can relate to these ideas. So first, I guess, what is Vach and what is Soma, and then we'll kind of get into it.
Okay. From the Vedic perspective, Vach is the creative word. Mm-hmm. If you kind of spell it in Roman transliteration, VAC, you can almost see the English word voice there. Yeah. Vach is identified in the Veda as feminine. She is she. Yeah. As a goddess, as it were, a power of creativity. Goddesses are powers of creativity. And in some of the songs of the Vedic, the Rig Veda, for example, the universe is said to come into existence through her singing a song. She sings forth the universe, and her voice becomes many syllables, and the many syllables become the many things in the universe. So the whole universe, from this perspective, if I could interpret it this way, I do interpret it this way. The whole universe is her song. The whole universe is
so beautiful.
And we are her syllables. And and so I think you can probably see almost a direct connection then with mantra.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mantra is the articulation of the goddess, of Vach, you see, of the universal power of creativity, the universal presence, transforming, reformative power. And of course, the mantra being an integral component of particularly of Tantra, well, Veda and Tantra.
Yeah.
And Soma, I think if we think of Vach as the universal voice, the universal word, Soma is the universal essence of life, the refined element of life that is the power of life. Now, I'm not really saying it in the term like Shakti.
Yeah.
It is described as later as a kind of form of Shakti, but I'm thinking of Soma as in the Vedic context. Soma is the power that enlivens. Soma is that which converts dead matter into living life.
Yeah.
And as such is the drink for the gods that is offered to the god Agni. Remember, I mentioned this a minute ago.
Yeah.
And so the drink of immortality, Amrita, the nectar. And we might understand this if we were trying to incorporate Vedic notions of Soma. We can think of Soma as that energizing kind of nectarian power and presence that infuses each cell of the body. And as it infuses each cell of the body, it gives it life and brings and sustains each cell of the body, so that when we nourish and cultivate and honor the presence of Soma, as it were, when we honor life itself, we can often, you hear it said that we can taste the nectar. We can taste the nectar of life. We can taste the presence of Soma moving through the body and sustaining it.
Yeah.
Right. So Vach and Soma. Vach is the creative word. The song that is sung through us. We are the words of this goddess Vach, the goddess Vach, and Soma is the power that then sustains us. You see, and it's it's really fascinating in the Vedic ritual, the integration of song and mantra with the offering of Soma to the fire, to the light. You see, it's all kind of held together in this wonderful integrated whole. By the way, I just wanted to mention, I just used the word whole. I'm translating the Sanskrit word sarva there.
Okay.
The entire, the entirety, the whole, everything. And that's what I translate in the book that you're referring to. I translate it as universe, sarva as universe. So the artful universe is this whole that is kind of turning on this universal artful principle of Rita that is sustained by Soma, expressed through Vach. Do you see how it all fits together?
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, and I love these two concepts. I mean, they are passed down, as you know, to the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, and that's how I've found them, and I really enjoyed reading more about them in their kind of Vedic origins. And one of the reasons I love Vach so much is because it sort of moves us away from this idea of language as being sort of just a kind of representational thing that comes from our mouth, and we just use it as in a pragmatic way to talk to each other, and really speaks to the kind of divine force of languages going all the way down to the very root, and then also kind of, you know, imbues our linguistic capacity with a sense of you know, divinity and therefore devotion, and then of course it speaks to the kind of poetry. Well, then it would make sense that, you know, a poetic kind of principle would be applied to how we then engage with that vach. And one of the things you talk about in the book is the sadhamada. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Sadhamada.
Yeah, the revel or drinking feast, where,
Is that translated?
yeah,
Okay.
where the poets come together and sort of take stabs at being the most poetic, which I thought was amazing. Do you want to talk about that ritual a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. It's did I translate it? It's drinking feast. Okay.
Yeah, I actually have quotes here. The revel or drinking feast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, in part, what they're drinking is soma.
Right.
And,
Were they physically drinking soma, or is this just?
It's really hard to tell.
It's hard to say.
It's really hard to tell. I mean, at the surface, you know, the narrative level, it looks like, yes, they may well have been drinking the soma. Here, then we need to ask, well, what was the soma physically? And we're not clear on what it was. It's clear that it was a pressed plant. It was a plant that was squeezed through cloth. You know, so there's some sort of essence that is obtained and then heated and refined and repressed and that sort of thing. I mean, pressed again, not repressed, but so it became a liquid, and this liquid was offered to the fire and drunk by the gods. And there are some suggestions here and there that the poets, the vipras, and in other words, kavi, the singers, would also drink the soma. There is a song from the Rig Veda where a description of the experience of drinking the soma leads to a kind of ecstasy. The singer describes a kind of flying through the air and from one horizon to the other horizon, that sort of thing. But it was during. Well, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Sadhamada was a contest. How's that? Maybe that's another way of saying it. Where a verbal contest where singers, poets would express their understanding, would express their imaginative kind of vision of the various connections in the world, the way things fit together, the connections of cause and effect, and that sort of thing. Those connections, it's hard to kind of say this briefly, but the connecting kind of tissue, if you will, the web that connected things together in the world, were known originally as the Brahman. So that some visionaries were able to see the Brahman. Well, how is it that everything fits together? How is it that things are connected? What is it that holds the world together rather than why doesn't it all just fall apart? You say, well, some were able, because they had drunk the soma, were able to see the Brahman. And by seeing the Brahman, then able to put it into words, put that vision into words. And that became the poetry.
Yeah.
It looks as if these contests were such that they probably went on for quite a while, because then there was, there was evidence in some way that one poet's poem was more powerful than another poet's poem, because things in the world would have changed or not have changed. You see, so there were those who were said to be able to see the Brahman more clearly, than others. They became what are known as Brahmanas, the source of our word Brahmin. But originally they were the seers, the poets who enjoyed the exhilarating effect of soma, and were able to then see how things fit together.
Wow. I'm not joking when I say I think we should revive this practice, this contest, and bring all the mystics together and have them be poetic, and we'll all see how we feel after each poem, and then whoever feels the most transformed gets the prize. Sounds amazing. So let's segue
well,
a little.
I think if I can put it
Yeah.
in the Veda, it's not that whoever feels most transformed, it would be whose poetry is most transformative for others.
Yes, yeah, that's what I think. That's what I sort of meant to say, is that those who had attended would be the most transformed by, which I think is just an incredible like rule of thumb to judge a contest by, rather than some kind of arbitrary notion of technique or something that might be the ruler of another kind of literary practice. So let's segue to your work with the Bhakti tradition, because I'd love to hear. I'm kind of interested in the relationship between these two things, because I see the clear relationship between your interest in Kashmir Shaivism and what we've talked about. Because to me, at least, and maybe you disagree with this, but I feel like there's a clear line between particularly the concepts that we find in the Vedic tradition and things that get explored in Kashmir Shaivism. But I'm interested then, to hear a little bit about how this all relates to you, to the Bhakti tradition, which, I mean, at least from my perspective, I know it's all, we could see it all as interconnected, obviously, but there's a way in which I see the Bhakti practices as being somewhat different than maybe what we associate with the tantric practices or whatnot. So anyway, I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe that relationship from your perspective.
Okay. One of my favorite songs, suktas. The word sukta means well spoken. Sukta, poems, songs from the Veda. The Rig Veda is what's known as the Nasadiya Sukta. It's a creation story, and in this creation story, that starts out with absolute non-dual, transcendent field of potential in which nothing yet exists, and yet the potential for everything exists.
Yeah.
And in this kind of infinite, boundless field of, you can't even say non-being, because non-being is the opposite of being, and since there is no being, there is no opposite. You say
exactly. Yeah.
Complete, absolute, non-dual potential. That in some way something stirs within this field, and the sukta, the hymn, the song, the poem describes this as a yearning. There's a yearning pervades or permeates tad ekam, that one, and then that yearning to be, then is the energy that leads to creation. That everything that exists is a result of this divine yearning to be, yearning to exist. Okay, and the hymn translates that. I mean, the Sanskrit in that hymn is actually kama. Often translated as desire. I see it as not so much desire, because desire suggests there's something to be desired.
Yeah.
There's an object. And so this is an objectless yearning to exist, okay? And that, so I translate it as love. There is a profoundly powerful yearning to exist, and that the universe exists because of this yearning, and that everything that is in some way an expression of this yearning to exist.
Mm.
And I see it as profoundly affirming that each one of us is an expression of a divine yearning to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that as a kind of as love. I translate that as love. And I'm not talking about love as an emotion, although it's expressed in emotions. I'm not talking about love as a sentiment,
Yeah.
although it's expressed in sentiment. It is the foundational, creative, and sustaining power of the universe. Okay, and that's what that's kind of the link in my mind between Vedic and Vedantic and tantric sensibilities with bhakti sensibilities, because what bhakti is doing is responding to this universal power of love.
Mm.
I think you probably know that the word bhakti, the word itself, comes from a verbal root that has something to do with sharing, with distributing, with offering, with giving. It's a little bit like if you have a birthday cake and you cut it into slices so that you can share the cake with others.
Yeah.
Bhakti is a sharing in this divine affirmation, this love that is the source and foundation and energy of the universe. You see, from the Bhakti perspective. So the Bhakti tradition is a tradition that is infused with a sense of response, a response to this intuition of love, a universal kind of divine love here,
Mm-hmm.
and that response that is a response in kind. I mean, one shares the same sort of qualities. So in other words, one responds to it with love.
Mm-hmm.
That there is the sense that one's life emerges out of love. And so then there is the response to the source, and that response is sharing that same quality, sharing love, in other words. And that sharing is bhakti. And there are many practices that allow or support this kind of sharing in love. You're familiar with them, the Nama Sankirtana, the chanting of the divine name over and over again in a communal setting, the serving, sevana or seva. And the Bhakti tradition recognizes dozens of practices. I've identified, I think it's 136, reading the Bhakti traditions. I think I've located 136 of them, but they are all understood to be ways in which a meditation is a good one, but ways in which one expresses gratitude and I go with these words again. The word gratitude is related to the word grace, and so these practices allow one to express one's gratitude and put one's response in the context of a sense of a divine presence.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to that word. Okay.
It's a good one.
And I think historically, my sense is historically, there's been a little bit of a separation between Tantra as a tradition and Bhakti as a tradition, or even Veda and Tantra and Bhakti, which in my mind is for me myself is it's kind of too bad, because I think Tantra, many of the forms of Tantra are actually expressions of a kind of an alignment and participation in this affirming Shakti, this affirming presence in one's life. And the Bhakti is the same thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see the two as necessarily distinct from each other.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, I don't know if maybe there's been some work on this, of almost theological kind of engagement between the two traditions, because I think you're right. They certainly seem complementary, and sometimes, especially the Tantra as it's expressed in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, can get quite esoteric and a little bit heady almost. It's very, especially Abhinavagupta's work is very dense. So
Yeah.
sometimes you could use a little bit of a heart opening bhakti
Well,
practice.
yeah, see, that's yeah. You put into words what I was just going to say. That sometimes it could be said that 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 the philosophy can get kind of dry. That it can be it can seem almost like metaphysics or something like that. You say
Yeah.
in the various the tattvas and all that, and I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I return to it over and over and over again. But it could be said that sometimes the system, the tantra as a system, can for some people feel kind of dry,
Yeah.
and so there might be times when it could be good to have some heart in it, and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
experience of the heart and the experience of gratitude and of fondness and affection and appreciation and the various emotions, even perhaps of sometimes of fear, you see.
Mm.
So that the mind is kind of warmed by the heart,
Mm.
and the heart is informed by the mind.
Yeah.
Because if one just lives in the emotions all the time, or the feelings, or then sometimes there can be confusion and
Yeah.
there can be
Manipulation. Yeah.
manipulation, that sort of thing. So, in my mind, a good yoga will integrate mind and heart.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's sort of a good note to end on. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I really enjoyed exploring some of these topics with you, Bill. Is there anything you want to kind of add, or is there anything that sort of, based on what we've talked about, might round up the conversation or bring it home, as it were?
Um, hmm. Well, how about this? There's one sutra from Narada's Bhakti Sutra that says, um, "Sarvada sarvabhavena nischantir bhagavaneva bhajaniya." I kind of stuttered there halfway through, but and I would translate it as love alone is to be worshipped
Mm.
with worry all the time with all of one's being.
Mm.
um, and to me, that in a way that integrates bhakti and tantra and Veda. And I
Will you
see it
just
all.
repeat that one more time? I just want to hear it one more time.
The sutra itself.
Both, yeah, the sutra and the translation. Just one more
Okay,
time.
so sarvada sarvabhavena nischantar bhagavaneva bhajaniya. Love. The word here is Bhagavan, but I'm going to translate it as love, capital L, love. Love only, or love alone, is to be worshipped without worry, all the time, with all of one's being.
That's beautiful. Wow, thank you, Bill. It's been lovely chatting with you. And I guess before we close, I'd love to give you an opportunity just to maybe share where people can get in touch with you, and if there's any workshops or any trainings or anything else people might look up to come find you. Do you
Sure,
want to share some of that?
sure. I do travel across North America and Europe a few times a year, and Asia. I'll be going to Hong Kong in a few weeks, for example. I go to
Lovely.
India frequently. Um, I have a website. Well, I have two websites. One is my college, my professor website.
Mm-hmm.
Another is my own personal website, which is the one for the retreats and workshops. And that, if people would like to write it down, is WKMH mahony.com. And that will give my schedule, that will give ways to buy books and that sort of thing.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your time with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jacob. It's been a pleasure for me too. Thanks.